So, where are we in our evolution or our ascension? We went through the Tower of Babel about 3,000 years ago. We got amnesia. We created fictitious cultural realities. And then, about the past 2 decades, there has been paradigm shifting to realizing that the other cultural versions of reality had validity. People started realizing that other cultures had some validity. They started learning from each other. They started learning that one culture could do some things better than another culture. We started learning from other cultures about how to cook, how to um, create remedies for diseases that some cultures didn't have. We learned how to do things in the West that only the East knew how to do. We went through this paradigm shift. It only began about 2 decades ago. Before that time, most cultural versions of reality totally misunderstood each other and only wanted to fight with each other. So, this has been a very recent shift in reality, this paradigm shift of realizing that other people have versions of reality that are just as valid as their own. And my field of study was in cultural awakening by understanding culture shock, by understanding other versions of cultural reality, by actually going into culture after culture and studying their culture, their origins of it, how their languages were created, and seeing that they could see and know many things that I really could not see or conceptualize from my point of view, from my perspective of my culture. So, by entering in many different cultures and seeing their version of reality, it broke through my own versions planted in my DNA. It woke up my DNA to raising my consciousness higher and higher until I could see deeply within each culture that not only was there a big cultural version, there were cultures within each city within another country. And within the cities, within the cultures, there were even smaller societies. There were groups, there were religions, there were clubs, there were many societies within the societies within the societies, which each had their version of reality. And then when you looked at culture through a microscope, you would realize that the version of reality was always individual. Each individual has their own version of reality, even though they try to harmoniously fit into the society they live in and fit into their family or fit into their school. It may often be very difficult for them to fit in because they don't really agree with their family. They don't really agree with their school. They don't really agree with their government. But they try to fit in, they try to follow the rules to be harmonious. That time is changing now because now we are realizing that's ridiculous. We should not need to change our version of reality to match our families or to match the schools or to match our society because those realities were created by people in a state of amnesia who didn't know anything better to do. So they created these states of versions of reality, and over the years, new versions of reality have been born to Earth because they're coming through a stream of consciousness that is not polluted by the old problem that was created in the Tower of Babel. They are no longer having this distortion in their DNA, in their seed atom when they are born. The basic problem of those born prior to 2012 is there was a distortion in the seed atom. the new children being born do not have that distortion in their seed atom. So the seed atom flows into the neuronets of the body and sees this perfect reality system within them, and it's completely individual because they have their own higher self. They have their higher self connected to the mind of God. They're connected to their whole own soul family, and none of this parts of their consciousness has anything to do with these old man-made systems of cultural beliefs that were based on a set of realities created by some cavemen who got amnesia, forgot who they are, and created their version of reality. So now we are moving into a time when all versions of reality are true and correct. Now is the time we will all realize this. This is something that I came to realize by going in and studying hundreds of cultures, hundreds of systems, education systems, religions, living amongst people in third world countries, and seeing that there are so many different versions of reality that only an idiot would sit in a classroom and listen to a teacher tell them that the reason that the Japanese are the way that they are is because they all grew up in very small villages, so they like to stick close together into tightly knit groups, and they like to be tight together in elevators. This is just pure nonsense. If anybody has lived in Japan, they would know that the people in Japan live the way they do because of their cultural group culture, but the looking at it as the reason they like to be close together is because they share this close proximity of belief and agreement. That has nothing to do with their reality. So realities in our textbooks in the education system are based on idiots who have not broadened their own perception beyond their own cultural beliefs. And those who do broaden their perceptions beyond their cultural beliefs would never have their beliefs and opinions placed in any textbook, because the purpose of education is to mold the mind to fit into the cultural patterns, beliefs of the society for which it was created for, so the government can continue to control the people. So it is time now to move out of the old education system. So those who are sitting in the classrooms with attention deficiency disorder because they are not interested in what is ignorantly being spoken to them need to be acknowledged. They need to be given credit for their own intelligence. A new education system must be created. And this new education system will train minds to think in a different way. The old education systems are all created to create separation, control, manipulation, one person being smarter than the other, one group being better than the other, debate systems, someone learning how to debate. We don't need debates in our harmonious world. We don't need manipulation. We don't need children getting so torn against each other in the classroom that they want to go out on the playgrounds and fight. That is not what we need. We need to go beyond the beliefs and concepts of the old realities. This is just the beginning. I have watched it begin for over 30 years. I taught classes in broadening cultural perceptions over 30 years ago, and I used a very simple little episode. It was called Mr. Kim's Print Shop, and this was a true story. I used this simple little story of Mr. Kim in his print shop, and when I was living in Korea, I went to Mr. Kim and I told him I needed these papers printed because I was going to be handing them out for a lecture in my classroom the next day, and I asked him if he could have them done by the next morning. And so I was expecting to pick up the papers for my class the next morning, But when I got there, Mr. Kim said no, they hadn't been finished yet because he had some friends that came in that needed a special favor done for them. So I presented that situation to my classroom and I said, well, was Mr. Kim right in doing what he did? Was this a good thing or a bad thing? Why did he do this? And 99% of students always judged Mr. Kim and said, oh, that was a very bad thing to do. He's a very bad businessman. He can't do business that way. But if those people understood, if they could look outside their own cultural reality and see the situation from Mr. Kim's point of view, they would know that in the Korean system, in the Korean society, it is always an obligation to place friends and families above anyone else, and especially an outsider who is a foreigner.